Hello, Skates Ontario members. We're coming to you tonight in preparation for the Skate Ontario AGM. And as advertised, we wanted to give this opportunity before the AGM meeting to do a more detailed presentation in support of the materials that have been posted for the proposed changes to the bylaws that the membership will be voting on, and also to review the audit. So for tonight's presentation webinar, we had a few people sign up, but for reasons we're not sure of, people were not able to attend. So I'm going to go ahead and go through part of the presentation tonight, so that for people who wanted to watch this on a recording, that information will still be there for you. I also want to emphasize that if people do have questions that we don't go over tonight and they'd still like to ask before the AGM, please go ahead and email those either to me or to your Ventnor, so that we can be aware of what your questions are and be able to provide you answers during the AGM. So for tonight's presentation, we're going to start off by going through the changes, the proposed changes to the Skate Ontario bylaws. So right now I'm going to introduce you to the chair of the Skate Ontario Governance Committee and Skate Ontario board member, Maggie Head, and Maggie can give you a quick overview of sort of how we got to these proposed bylaws and where we're going with them for Skate Ontario. So Maggie, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lisa. First, I actually want to say a big thank you to Janet Buckwell and the entire governance committee for the amazing amount of work that was done on these bylaws. These bylaws were really developed and approved by the board of directors, but, in keeping with good governance. So the objective of these were that, we complete regular reviews of the bylaws and other pieces of policy to ensure that the organization remains up to date with best practices for good governance. We also want to ensure that we continue to remain in line with the changes that Skate Canada was implementing to their bylaws. So they had changes to the nature of the section organizations. So documents were posted for all members to review on August 14th, 2020. And that included a summary of the bylaw changes and a clean copy of the board approved bylaw changes. So the next steps are obviously member review, ratification and enactment, which will occur at the AGM, which is why we're posting this ahead of this weekend's AGM.
Thank you, Maggie. So now I'm going to give you a quick overview of the key areas and the things that have been proposed as changes for the bylaws. And you can see that we've got changes proposed sort of fit under four main categories. So number one, I think, is pretty typical as bylaws get reviewed, and some of them are just straight up housekeeping changes. So to update proper names, some of the language, and of course, as you make adjustments, the numbers of the bylaws have to change. So those things are all filed under housekeeping, and I'm not going to go through those tonight. I think that they're pretty clear when you look at the summary document. The other area that changes have been proposed are clarity of Skate Ontario's role as a recognized provincial sport organization. And, Maggie referred to the fact that these changes have been made at the same time as Skate Canada was making complementary changes in their bylaws. And this is something that has been discussed over a number of months, maybe years. And, Karen Butcher is online tonight, the president of Skate Ontario, and Karen has been part of those discussions over quite some time, talking about making sure that our bylaws are a modern reflection of the roles of the national sport organization and the roles of the provincial sport organization. And as you are probably aware, we also have agreements with our funding partner in the province of Ontario, as do all the provinces. So there was just some clarity updates within the bylaws to make sure that they clearly refer to Skate Ontario and to Skate Canada, to both. And also that it makes clear that our members in Ontario, as members of ours, are required to follow Ontario laws and policies. And this would cover things in Ontario, like for instance, Rowan's Law. So it reflects in our bylaws that as an Ontario member, you're required to follow Ontario governance and policy. So there's a number of places in the bylaws where there's just some added clarity about that. The third area, which is pretty easy, is one section of the bylaws was just struck. And that area is actually the safe sport section. And that's not to say that safe sport is going away. It's just that safe sport belongs in policy. So again, that's something that obviously we work on with Skate Canada. We have a national safe sport policy. Ontario has a role within that. So all of that is removed. It just doesn't belong in the bylaws. So that will now all be out in policy. And then as part of our regular review that Maggie talked about, just always updating governance practices. So those are sort of the four key areas. So what I'm going to do now is just hit a couple of highlights. Oops, sorry, let me see if I can get to what I want here. Okay, okay, so I'm just going to start to share my screen again. And if you look on the Skate Ontario website at the materials that were posted that Maggie referenced, the key document that will help you go through the bylaws is I think this document that's a summary. It's called the Summary of ByLaw Changes, and you can see there's 3 columns here. So on the left, we have what is the bylaw currently. In the middle, we have what was the change that the Skate Ontario Board of Directors has approved, Governance Committee recommended, Board of Directors approved. And then on the right is a bit of an explanation, what's the rationale. So there are 10 sections in our bylaws. Number 1 is just our general section. And the key change here is in number 1. Sorry, I highlighted the wrong number. 1 second. Is down here in 1.2J. So this is our first reference that we talked about where we're making this change. And again, this is in concert with changes that Skate Canada passed at their AGM in June. And you can see here that in the current bylaws, so that members are registered Skate Canada member clubs and skating schools. And this language is now changed to say clubs, registered club or skating school located within the province of Ontario and complying with the corporation's bylaws, policies, procedures, rules, and regulations, and is also registered with Skate Canada. So that's a handy mouthful. But that's really the heart of these changes that that make sure that our bylaws are specific to Ontario and make sure that that relationship is clear, that members have to follow Ontario bylaws, regulations, and the rest of the list there. So the rest of there aren't really other changes other than housekeeping items in section number 1. Section number 2 is the membership section. And all of the changes here follow that same thing about making it clear the membership relation of Ontario clubs and skating schools to Skate Ontario. So if you take a look here, you can see that that follows all the way through. So 2.2, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, all add that reinforcement that of the nature of Skate Ontario, and making sure that our members are clearly members of Skate Ontario. So that is basically all of the changes in number 2. Then section number 3 is safe sport. As I mentioned, this is the section that has just simply been struck. And again, safe sport is not going anywhere. It's just moving out of the bylaws and into policy and procedure. So that's an easy one. Getting into number 4, there's you will now from here on always see a reference to part of the changes just being numbering, because we struck section 3. Everybody else gets bumped up one. So here we go through renumbering. The only other change in this section is purely a modernization change that allows for the management of proxy when meetings are conducted by electronic means. So that's just purely modernization, and I think certainly extra applicable now as we do more things online here in 2020. Our next change, and these are all things related to updating governance to more modern standards. So this is section number 5, refers to governance. And even though, as most of you are probably aware, ONCA is still out there on the horizon, still not yet passed by the Ontario government. I think they've been busy with other things this year. So a lot of these changes are in line with what's going on in our sector, and just also starting to move towards the standards that are proposed within ONCA. So all of these things under governance are really modernization standards in line with what's happening in our sector. One thing that is also changed in here is the change of our nominations subcommittee is being made a direct committee of the board of Skate Ontario. And the reason for that is to allow it to, to really help enhance succession planning for the organization, and ensuring that, that committee is always up and running, thinking about the business competencies that are required for the board of Skate Ontario, and also ensuring somewhat of their independence, right? And thinking of who they report to, they just report directly to the board and are able to work on that succession planning all year. This brings us to our next sections. Really the only other change. So the next section cover who the officers are, cover the board committees, cover finance and management, amendment of bylaws, and finally notice. In all of these sections, the changes are strictly related to clarity and to modernization. The only change of note, and we announced this last year, is under finance and management. Of course, it changes us to the new fiscal year. So as you're aware, this year, with us having our AGM in September, this is the first year where we are we've moved from a year end of March 31st to a year end of June 30th. So that is changed in there, and that is the highlights. As I said, because we don't have people on here who have not seen these documents before tonight, and so we don't have additional member questions, please feel free, if you watch this video and you want to ask further questions, please feel free to reach out. You can email me. You can look on our website, you can call me or email me, find my contact information, and we'll make sure that we get any further questions answered. So Maggie or Karen, I'm not sure if either of you have any other comments or anything that you wanted to add with regards to bylaws updates.
I don't at this time. I don't know, Karen, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, thanks, Lisa. It's a great job going through everything. And Maggie, for your comments. I think the bylaw changes are very straightforward. And as Lisa said, if anybody does have any questions, please let us know. We're happy to answer them.
Okay, I'm now going to just show a couple of slides related to the audit, related to audit highlights. So just a couple of quick notes. I will say again, if you have other questions because you've chosen to watch this video, please feel free to reach out to Derek Ventnor. So same as me, you can find all his contact information, either his phone number or his email are available on the Skate Ontario website. And if you send those questions on, we will make sure that we get them answered for you and that they can get addressed on September 12th. So just a couple of very quick highlights with regards to the audit. I think first and most important, and really the thing that, on behalf of the membership, we really care that is most important, is that when you look at the audit documents, is the opinion from our auditor that the audit is clean and unqualified. So what that means is that they have identified no issues with the organization or any of our reporting. So that's the first thing that you always look for in the audit. The next key item in there is the balance sheet numbers for the organization. So as you will see in those documents, the value of the organization on June 30th was approximately $2.4 million. So the good thing about that is that that confirms that we are positioned well financially to adapt as needed at this time. And we're very lucky. Some of our fellow similar organizations, without a responsible level of reserve funds, have been forced to make some very difficult decisions. So, we always say that you build a responsible reserve fund for a rainy day. So, fortunately, our balance sheet reflects that our organization is in a healthy position. The next key document within the audit is our income statement. So key highlights there. Because of the change in the fiscal year, the audit is for a 15-month period. So you can think of it as being like our regular year that would have ended on March 31st, plus what's called the stump year, so the subsequent 3 months. So if you look at, so key highlights from the income statement. So our pre-pandemic activity for our normal old fiscal year that ended March 31st, the activity was largely on target to budget for those 12 months that ended in March. This audit then also includes the subsequent 3 months, the stump year. And we had planned for a significant loss in that stump year from April to June. And that is just because it was always just going to be a question of timing. So as you know, largest portion of our income comes from membership fees, and based on the payment schedule of membership fees, we actually typically have no income for those 3 months. And we have some large expenses, some of which we didn't put out, like our conference that had to be canceled due to COVID. So we had planned for a significant loss during that stump period, again, just because of timing. So in this 15-month audit, we had 2 of those quarters where typically the organization would lose money. So that's typical for that 3-month period. The actual loss that you will see in the audit is actually significantly less than we had budgeted. And that's because we were able to mitigate our losses because of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program that we were able to access, and also some expense control measures. Some of those were things that were out of our hands. We had to cancel things like a planned training camp for the athletes and our conference. And some of them, of course, were organizational decisions to tighten up, given that we were really, early days of the pandemic during that stump year. The other thing that I think is important to understand for the organization is, of course, we have an investment portfolio, and our finance committee, Derek and our finance committee, have set that up in a way that it is very conservative. So that has been good for us during the pandemic. It means that our investment portfolio has really weathered the market volatility that we saw during that time period. And those were really the things that I think are key about the organization at this time. And you can see, and any additional questions, please feel free to email Derek, and he can either reach out to you and answer those, or we can address it during the AGM. So Derek, I see that you are on tonight. So again, I'll ask, Karen or Derek, if you have any other comments that you think would be important about the audit.
No, I think the audit just simply proves that we, as an organization, have been very responsible and are also very lucky during this situation that we've been taking all the right steps and we are able to weather the storm. Unfortunately, there are other organizations that are in dire straits and are having, to make some really tough choices. And instead of trying to figure out exactly how we make sure our athletes are safe and how we go forward and how we make things work during this difficult time. So it's nice to see that we've had a clean audit, and it's nice to see that we are able to figure things out going forward. And once again, I'll repeat that if anybody has any questions, please let us know. We're happy to answer them.
And okay, so thank you for that, Karen. And, so thanks to anyone who's watching this, and we look forward to, if you have other things that you'd like us to review or questions, please let us know. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the AGM on Saturday.